Lights flash in the rearview mirror, and the woman at the wheel pulls over with calm precision. It's late, and the empty streets echo with the hum of idling engines. The officers approach her car, hands resting near their holsters, their faces unreadable. The woman rolls down her window, her demeanor composed but watchful. She knows how these situations can go. The first officer leans in, his tone clipped and authoritative. "Ma'am, do you know why we stopped you?" She answers calmly, her voice measured, but her words seem to catch him off guard. He exchanges a glance with his partner, who shifts uncomfortably. This isn't her first encounter like this, but tonight is different. What they don't know, what they haven't even thought to consider, is that the woman sitting in front of them holds a rank that outranks them all. She's the new chief of their precinct, a position she's earned through years of dedication, resilience, and expertise. The air grows tense, not because of her response, but because of what's coming next. How will they react when the truth comes out? Will this be a teachable moment, or will egos and assumptions take over? Stay tuned to find out what happens when roles are reversed and expectations are shattered in an instant. The officer's flashlight glints off the badge clipped to her dashboard, but he doesn't seem to notice. He's too focused on the driver's license she's handed over. The woman watches him carefully as he studies it, his brow furrowing slightly. His partner stands back, arms crossed, glancing between her and the car like he's waiting for something to happen. Moments like these are all too familiar to her. She spent years proving herself in a field where she's constantly underestimated, not just as a woman, but as a Black woman. She knows the stereotypes they're likely carrying in their minds, even if they don't realize it themselves. The officer hands back her license, his tone still firm, but slightly less confident. "You're new around here, huh?" he asks. She nods, holding back the urge to say more. She could end this right now with a single sentence, but something about this situation makes her hesitate. Her mind flashes back to her first day at the precinct, just a few weeks ago. The whispers in the hallways, the skeptical looks from some of the officers she now oversees. It wasn't surprising. But she's always believed actions speak louder than words. Tonight, though, her patience is being tested. For now, she lets the moment hang in the air, waiting to see where it will go next. The silence between them stretches, broken only by the hum of engines and the occasional crackle of the officer's radios. The officer still hasn't stepped back from her window, and his partner shifts on his feet, clearly growing restless. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," the first officer says, his voice steady but tinged with something unspoken. "Mind telling us where you're headed?" Her fingers tighten slightly on the steering wheel, but her expression remains calm. "I'm just coming back from work," she replies evenly. It's the truth, though it feels like an understatement. Work for her isn't just a job, it's a responsibility, one she spent her entire career preparing for. The second officer steps closer now, his eyes scanning her car with a mix of curiosity and something that feels like doubt. "Late night for you, huh?" he says, his tone lighter but not exactly friendly. She could tell them everything right now, who she is, why she's here, but she doesn't. Instead, she decides to see how far this will go, how much they'll reveal about themselves. It's not about catching them in the wrong. It's about understanding the culture she's walked into. As the exchange drags on, her thoughts shift to her first weeks at the precinct. Not everyone had welcomed her, though most tried to hide it behind polite words and forced smiles. There were those who doubted her authority, others who doubted her experience. She had brushed it off at the time, but moments like this brought it all back. The tension in the air thickens, and she wonders, will they realize who she is before this conversation goes too far? Or will their assumptions blind them completely? The first officer steps back slightly, motioning for her to stay put. "Hold on," he says, his tone clipped as he moves toward their patrol car. His partner lingers near her window, his gaze lingering on her face, as if trying to place her. She meets his eyes, steady and unwavering, but doesn't offer any more information. Inside the patrol car, the glow of the computer screen illuminates the first officer's face as he runs her license. He pauses, his expression changing as something catches his attention. He leans closer to the screen, reading the details again. The woman watches him from her rearview mirror, her heart steady, but her mind racing. She knows this is the moment when everything shifts. Meanwhile, the second officer clears his throat, trying to fill the silence. "So you're new to the area," he says, his tone still casual, but with a slight edge. She nods again, but doesn't elaborate. Let him squirm, she thinks. The officer in the car suddenly steps out, his pace slower now, his face unreadable. He exchanges a quick look with his partner, who straightens up immediately. The shift in their body language is subtle but unmistakable. Uncertainty, maybe even a flicker of fear. Approaching her window, the first officer hesitates, his earlier confidence replaced by something else entirely. "Ma'am," he begins, his voice lower now, almost cautious. "Would you mind stepping out of the vehicle for a moment?" The request hangs in the air, heavy with implications. She takes a slow breath, her mind calculating every possibility. Does she reveal who she is now, or wait for them to figure it out? The tension crackles like static electricity, the moment teetering on the edge of something monumental. She steps out of the car slowly, her movements calm but deliberate. The chill in the night air brushes against her skin, but she barely notices. Both officers are watching her now, their earlier authority replaced by a tension they're trying to hide. She's been in countless situations where she's had to hold her ground, but this one feels different. "Is there a problem?" she asks, her voice firm but without anger. She stands tall, unflinching, as the first officer clears his throat, clearly struggling to maintain control of the situation. "Just a precaution, ma'am," he says, but the words sound hollow, like he doesn't fully believe them himself. He hesitates again before continuing, his eyes flicking to his partner as if looking for backup. "We didn't realize who you were." The partner's jaw tightens at the admission, his gaze shifting between her and his colleague. It's clear now that they've pieced it together, or at least enough of it. But instead of de-escalating, the air grows heavier. "I'm curious," she says, stepping closer, her tone still measured. "What made you pull me over in the first place?" The first officer stumbles over his words, trying to frame a response that doesn't sound incriminating. "Routine check," he mumbles, but she catches the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The second officer shifts uncomfortably, his earlier confidence now long gone. Before anyone can say more, the crackle of their radio cuts through the silence. "Dispatch to Unit 12. We've got a situation at the precinct. Immediate assistance needed." Her eyes narrow slightly, and she steps back, gesturing toward her car. "Well, officers," she says, her voice carrying a weight that demands attention, "it seems you've got work to do. I'll follow you back to the station. After all, I wouldn't want to be late for my team." The words land like a thunderclap, and for a split second, neither officer moves. They exchange a look, part confusion, part realization, and the gravity of the moment finally sinks in. The situation has gone far beyond a routine stop, and they both know it. The stakes have just been raised, and the night is far from over. The officers hesitate for a moment, their pride and uncertainty holding them back. Finally, the first officer nods stiffly and gestures toward his car. They quickly get in, their movements less confident now, and start the engine. She follows closely behind, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but not enough to deter her. As they pull up to the precinct, the scene is chaotic. Officers are scrambling inside, their radios buzzing with overlapping voices. She steps out of her car, and all eyes turn to her. Some faces are etched with relief, while others freeze in shock, realizing who she is. The two officers from the traffic stop linger near the entrance, suddenly unsure of where they stand. She strides past them without a word, heading straight into the heart of the precinct. Inside, a young officer rushes up to her, briefing her quickly about the situation, an unruly civilian who's been taken into custody. She listens carefully, nodding as she takes in the details. But before she can respond, a familiar voice rings out from behind her. "Chief, glad you could make it." It's one of the senior officers, the same one who had openly questioned her appointment during her first week. His tone is polite now, but she can sense the lingering tension. She turns back toward the two officers who had pulled her over. They're standing awkwardly near the entrance, clearly unsure of what to do. The room grows quieter as more people realize what's happening. Finally, she breaks the silence, addressing the entire room. "Before we handle the current situation," she says, her voice steady but commanding, "I'd like to thank Officers Harris and Lee for bringing me here tonight." Her tone carries a subtle edge, and the two officers visibly flinch at being singled out. Then she pauses, letting the tension build before delivering the twist. "It's important to remember," she continues, her eyes scanning the room, "that leadership isn't about rank. It's about trust, respect, and the choices we make, on and off duty." Tonight was a good reminder of that. The message lands exactly as intended, leaving the two officers and the rest of the precinct with something to think about. But just as she's about to move on, the radio crackles again with another urgent call. Without missing a beat, she nods to her team and steps into action, proving once again why she's the one in charge. As the precinct sprang into action, she seamlessly stepped into her role, directing her team with calm precision. The earlier tension from the traffic stop faded into the background, replaced by the focused energy of handling the task at hand. She moved quickly, making decisions that demonstrated not just her authority, but her deep understanding of the job and the people she now led. By the time the situation was resolved, the chaos had subsided, and the precinct returned to its usual rhythm. Officers exchanged glances, many of them seeing her in a new light. Even the two who had pulled her over seemed unsure of how to approach her now. Before leaving, she called a brief meeting in the squad room. Her voice was steady, but there was warmth in her tone. "Tonight, we faced a challenge, and we handled it together. But let's not forget, respect is earned every day, with every decision we make. That's what defines us as a team." The room was silent for a moment, her words settling in. Then one by one, heads nodded in agreement. As she walked out, she passed the two officers from earlier. They stood a little straighter, murmuring a quiet, "Good night, Chief." She smiled, not smugly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew she had just taken a big step toward building something stronger. The night had tested them all, and in the end, it had reminded everyone, including herself, of the power of leadership and the importance of accountability.